All right, everybody, come on in, grab a virtual seat. We'll get started in about 20 seconds. And it would help, since I'm here by myself, I don't have a presenter. It would help if any of you who hears me speaking would go ahead and write a comment in the chat to say you can hear me okay. It's always tough when I'm by myself. I don't have. There you go, loud and clear. Thank you. That's a big help for me. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Now's a good time. So welcome everybody to another presentation of the online online ColdFusion Meetup. I saw somebody write a comment 5x5. I don't get that, but go ahead and share with me what you mean by that. Greetings everybody. So welcome to another presentation of the online ColdFusion Meetup. I'm Charlie Arehart and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And this edition of the Meetup, our 303rd, being recorded on Thursday, December 14th, 2023 at noon US Eastern Time. You've got me. And I'm happy to be here. I always enjoy the opportunity to present. And we'll be doing this probably every year from now on, because you may have heard that Adobe's coming out with CF 2024 next year. So anyway, this is migrating apps to ColdFusion 2023 from earlier versions. And before we get started, I'd just like to remind everybody that if you ever are wondering and want to share with people how to know more about the meetings, you can see at the bottom of the screen, ColdFusionMeetup.com is a domain name that takes you to the Meetup site where you can find out about the future and past meetings. And then the URL for the meeting is this YouTube meeting you guys are watching right now. And I post those URLs after the meeting at the recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com URL. And then it's also in the Meetup site as well. And if you're interested in presenting on the Meetup, I welcome speakers. Seems like people are happy just to watch, but anyway, I have a blog post there at speak.coldfusionmeetup.com that'll give you more information on the details if you're ever interested in presenting. So let's go ahead and move on. All right. So, and I think you've seen enough of my little face for now, so I'll go ahead and just focus on the presentation. Sorry, I'm trying to click on the right buttons in the StreamYard interface. I feel like I'm not succeeding, so goodness gracious. Can I move this out of the way? Come on, let's go. I'll do this. Nope, can't do that. Can't do this. It's just so weird. I'm having some technical difficulties, and it's just so hard when I'm on my own. There you go. That's it. So sorry about that fumbling. So moving on. We're going to talk about migrating your apps to ColdFusion 2023. And there's a little background about myself. I'm an independent consultant, server troubleshooter. You can reach me by email. You can also reach me in social media, and all the social medias. I'm at the same address, Arehart, real easy. And let's go ahead and proceed. And you'll see in the bottom right corner a reminder as well of my social media handle and the domain name. So if you're ever wondering, just look down there. So we're going to talk first, before we get started, about CF 2023 and the earlier versions. I want to talk about some general migration tips that I find are helpful to people. And so we'll get those out of the way. And sometimes they're more important to some people's challenges than what's new about the new version. Anyway, then we'll talk about not what's new. I want to be clear. I'll talk later about what we're not going to cover. This is about the compatibility issues. That's all our focus is. We're not talking about what's new, and even more on that later. But I'll talk about the compatibility issues, and there aren't many, in 2023. Then you have to remember that when you've come from earlier versions, well, you might inherit compatibility issues that were introduced in 2021 or 2018 or 2016 or 11. And so depending on where you're coming from, these other matters could be very important to you. And then I'll end with some tools and resources on migration, which often, again, are very helpful for people beyond what I might share here. And I don't know why that slide showed up out of order. I apologize for that. But anyway, we're going to talk first about how easy such a migration will be. And I'll just say it depends on how many versions back you're jumping from. So if you're coming from 2021 to 2023, that's going to be pretty easy. And we'll talk about why that's so in a moment. Although you could have trouble, let me just be clear, you could have trouble going from 2021 to 2023, and it has nothing to do with ColdFusion 2023. So I'll explain that caveat in a moment. And for some people, such a move from one version to another may be trivial, and for others, it may seem difficult, and the challenges may be overstated. By overstated, I mean people may say, oh, ColdFusion 2023 is broken. And I'm like, no, I'll help you find out. Maybe it's not broken. Maybe there's another explanation. And maybe it's not CF 2023. Maybe it was something that was introduced in 2021 and you skipped from 2018. Whatever, we'll cover all those bases. What I want to say is that for most people, it's going to be somewhere in the middle. It may not be trivial, but it should not be difficult. It should not take days. It should not take weeks. It should not take months to go from one version of CF to another. Now, I know some people are going to go, oh, we did, and it took us 4 months. I'll say that's very unusual. Very unusual. I help people do this literally every day, and it's generally pretty straightforward and easy. And part of it is if you know what I'm going to share with you, you might come to an understanding of things that changes your perspective, and you might go, oh, well, if we only knew that, it wouldn't have taken us 4 months. So anyway, we'll get to that. And the goal of this talk is to help you get over those various humps. So I'm going to give you the information you need to be able to do this on your own, or I can help you later. We'll talk about that. And then finally, yes, I don't know why that button came up out of order, but this presentation, the slide deck you're looking at, it's already online at my website, carehart.org/presentation. So again, bottom right corner, carehart.org, go to the presentations. And if you want to, you can grab these slides. It's not important that you do. And I think it's better if you don't, because it can distract you from hearing what I'm saying, because you're looking ahead at what I'm going to say and you're not hearing what I am saying. So just quickly about myself, I'm an independent consultant that focuses on server troubleshooting. I assist organizations of all sizes and experience levels, whether you're newcomers or long timers. I can help everybody. I just do it every day, work remotely 99% of the time, secure, safe, easy, via some shared desktop. I'll use Zoom by default. We can use Teams or Meet or whatever you like. And honestly, I solve most problems in less than an hour. And I teach you as we go so you understand what we're doing. You don't just get the answer, you understand how to do it, so you don't need me the next time. And you wait till you have another problem. And bottom line is your satisfaction is guaranteed. If you don't feel the time we spend together is valuable, you won't pay for that time. And you can learn more about my rates and approach and stuff, including my online calendar at carehart.org/consulting. Real easy to find. But to be clear, I'm not selling anything in this session at all. I'm just sharing my experience and others' experiences that I've found on the web, in the community. I'll share some of those tips. And I see a comment, had a legacy app from a few months ago from CF10 to CF23, and it was quite easy, only taking a couple days. I'm just going to click on that. There was Roman sharing his experience that he'd gone from CF10 to 2023. Absolutely. I help people make even those large of a leap. And it really can be that simple. Now, I grant some people will say, no, it was terrible for us. Again, we'll talk about some of the reasons why that could be later on, but let's move on. So here's the first thing I want to say. Before we talk about the specifics of CF 2023, I just want to talk about in general, don't blame CF unfairly when your migration goes south. People often blame the new CF version when there's other reasons that are the cause for your problems. One really common one, let's just get this out of the way, is you might set up a new machine with a new version, or you'll put the new CF version on the same machine as the old version, and you may not bring forth the CF admin settings or the Java settings that ColdFusion uses that you'd used in the previous version. I see this all the time. And of course, some things are obvious, like if you don't bring data sources, your apps will fail because there's no data source. But I'm saying there might be other more subtle problems that things will fail left and right because you made some change in the old version that you didn't bring into the new version. Another example is the secure profile. You might have turned it on in the old version and not in the new, or more likely where you get into trouble is you don't turn on secure profile on the old version, but somebody installing it chooses to install it on the new version. And that secure profile changes about 20 admin settings. There's just all kinds of settings, there's dozens, if not hundreds of potential settings that could make a big impact. And you'll blame the new version when it's instead just some admin setting or Java setting that's the issue. So just want to put that out there. And I did a talk on migrating and comparing admin settings between versions in this talk at carehart.presentations. Just look for the thing called migrating admin settings or that specific link. If you get the presentation, you'll be able to grab that link and it'll take you right to that page right to that section of the page to find that presentation. So we covered that in more detail in another talk. Here's another one. Maybe you applied a CF update to the new version, but an error occurred and you didn't notice the error occurred. You know, sometimes you're the ones doing this stuff or sometimes somebody else is doing it. Either way, whoever does the update, they might miss that an error occurred. And I want to point out that there's an update install log. And in that install log, you might find that there's errors in the applying of the update. So that's not about the new version. That's about your update to the new version. And I'll just share that I did a blog post on this several years ago, and it's still valuable today, called Solving Common Problems with CF Updates in CF10 and above, because it was starting in CF10 that we had that nice new update feature, and people have been having trouble with it ever since, and this blog post covers that. So again, you can get the slides later and get this link later, and the recording will be made available as soon as we're done. Now, here's another issue. Maybe the new CF runs on a more recent Java version than you used on the old version. Now, I'm going to be clear about this. Adobe sets what the Java versions can be for each version. So, for example, CF 2021 and 2018 only ran on Java 11. CF 2016 ran on Java 8. And originally, CF 11, I believe, ran on Java 7. So anyway, there's been different versions over the years of Java. And CF 2023 runs on Java 17. Now, that can get confusing, but I just want to clarify what I'm getting at is there's updates within those Java versions, often many updates. They're quarterly updates. And maybe you might be on the same Java version on one version of CF versus another, and that might be just different update levels. But again, I want to repeat that if you're going to 2023, it will be on Java 17. And you can't make it anything more or less than 17. And 2021 and 2018 were on Java 11. And you can't make it more or less than those. But the point is, those differences, sometimes there's an issue there. Now, Adobe tends to take care of problems where ColdFusion has an issue due to versions of Java. But I'm just letting you know that's something to keep in your mind. It could be something about Java versions. And in particular about updates, I want to point this out. This is not so much relevant to 2023. Excuse me, this is a leftover from the version of the talk I did on 2021. But if you, on 2021 or 2018, if you go to Java 11.0.11 or later, or if you're on 2016, you go to Java 1.8.0.291 or later, those block calls to TLS, if it's not supporting TLS 1.2 or above, the site you're calling, the CF HTTP will fail, or a data source call will fail, or mail server will fail. So just sometimes there's issues with Java. I'm just saying there's sometimes issues with Java where even updates within a given Java version can be where the root cause of some of your problems are. So again, we're not even talking about the version of CF. We're talking about Java version. So I talked about that particular problem in this blog post back in 2021. Again, don't worry about that now. If you're just focused on 2023, it's not as important. Although I guess I should say 17 out of the box, Java 17 out of the box will also block calls to TLS. If you make calls to servers that don't support at least TLS 1.2 or above, those calls will fail, not because 2023 changed, but because the Java underlying 2023 changed. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. I don't want to belabor this point. I think I've made enough about it. Now let's move on to the far more common problem, and this is so important to keep in your head. If you're moving to a new server, and of course, when I say server, if you're going to AWS and you've been on a VM in some hosting company, or you're moving to Azure or Google Cloud or Oracle container, whatever, all I'm trying to say is if you're moving to a new platform as a part of your migration, man, be aware that there's going to be a bunch of changes that might happen that have nothing to do with CF. So for example, that new machine will have a new IP address, and other servers you call out to may be restricted as to who can call them, like a database server or a mail server or some API. And you may have configured your old CF box to be reachable by that thing, but you forget, when we move to the new box, we've got to change that thing to be callable by the new IP address of the new VM or new machine or whatever it is you're running. I'm just saying, that's one example. Here's another one. You might not realize that in setting up the new machine, you may have a web server, might be IIS, might be Apache, might be Nginx, whatever it is. You might have set up the web server on the old machine in some way that you've not thought to do on the new machine. And therefore, things don't work right. Again, having nothing to do with ColdFusion, but some web server issue. And you might think, oh, come on, people don't make this. They make this mistake every day. I'm telling you. Here's another one. You might forget to establish the needed file permission changes that you had made on the old server. There might be some folder that CF's got to write to as a part of your application, and somebody did that on the old server, but now they're on the new server, and they forgot to give those permissions on the new server. I'm not beating that dead horse. These are enough issues that for most of you, you can take the ball and run with it. But I'm just going to remind you of things like you're changing the OS that CF runs on almost always, right? If you go to a new machine, maybe you were running on Windows 2012 or 2008, and now you're running on 2016 or 2019 or 2022. By the way, CF 2023 only supports Windows 2019 and Windows 2022. It doesn't support older versions. People still run it. Don't worry. You don't have to move your OS. You might find that I have got CF 2023 even running on Windows Server 2008, but formally Adobe only supports later versions. So anyway, moving on, you might change the OS that CF runs on. You might change the version of the database. You might change the version of the web server. I'm just saying, when you move to a new machine and things don't work, before you blame ColdFusion, maybe it's something else that changed. Any of these are possibilities. Furthermore, let me just plant this seed. You may find that if you would implement the previous version that you were running on, let's say it was CF 2018, if you put 2018 on the new machine and tried to run things, you might find it would fail also, which is proof that the problem's not CF 2023. It's that even 2018 doesn't work on the new machine. And there's just any of these number of possible things that could be amiss. So I'm just trying to stretch your brain to think about things that you maybe not had considered. Conversely, consider also that you might have problems that you think don't work. And it might be that if you move to the new version or implement some update, it fixes some problem that you think can't work. Maybe it didn't work on 2021 or 2018 or 2016 or 11. Don't go thinking it won't work on the new version. Maybe it will. Or if you immediately install the version of CF and try it, don't forget that you need to update it. Like, depending on what installer you get, the installer might have no updates. The original installer from May of this year had no updates on it at all. You had to apply the latest update, which is 6. And then they came out with a new installer in October, and that included update 5. Well, you still need to apply update 6. So again, these are a lot of little things that have nothing to do with particular CF versions. It's just things to be aware of. And I'm just going to point out that as far as the updates and the new versions are concerned, just pay attention to the release notes. There are tech notes for each update. There's release notes for the new versions of CF. You might find discussions of things. And by the way, sometimes you'll also see what they call known issues, where they're admitting, hey, this particular thing is going to happen. We know that's going to happen. It's a known issue. It doesn't work currently. That's another subject. I should have added that to this. In fact, let me just quickly go edit the presentation just to put that in there. For future people. There you go. All right. So moving on. I also want to talk about what we won't cover. What we won't cover in this talk are things like new and changed features. That's not the point of this talk. I'm not telling you what's new and different that you could take advantage of in 2023. That's covered elsewhere. First of all, it's covered in the docs, the ColdFusion docs. And by the way, don't get stuck on looking only at the CFML reference. That's not the only place to look. There's also a developer's guide. And within that, it's got a what's new for each version. So definitely check out more than just the CFML reference, to which don't just look at cfdocs.org. I love cfdocs.org like everybody else, but it's generally only the reference. It's got some other stuff, but it does not have that developer's guide. That developer's guide is 3,000 pages of content. It's only on the Adobe website. You need to go to the Adobe documentation to see that developer's guide. But let's move on. There's blog posts that the CF team comes out with when the new release comes out. And so if you look at coldfusion.adobe.com, that's what's called the portal, coldfusion.adobe.com, there were blog posts back in May and since from the Adobe team sharing tips about the new version. So I'm saying you can learn about the new version in the docs, on the blog. I do a hidden gems talk for each release. I've already done the one for CF 2023, did it at CF Summit, and I did it even before that. So anyway, you can go to my website and see that talk, Hidden Gems in CF 2023. And I covered CF Hidden Gems in 2021 and 2018 and 2016. So you can go back and look at those. And I cover language changes and installation and administration changes and underlying library version changes and OS and database support and licensing and pricing, differences between standard and enterprise. Again, that's not the focus of this talk. Those are covered in that past talk. Ben Nadell's also done a post on language changes to CF 2021 between previous versions in 2021. He did a little post, not say little, I'm saying he did a post on that specific subject. I don't think he's yet updated it for 2023, but anyway, there's the link to his presentation, or sorry, his blog post. And then some of you may know about Akbar Sait, who has for years put together a list of community resources on each release. And the last one he did was on CF 2021. He hasn't yet done one on 2023, but he did 2021, and earlier ones are listed on the right side of his website. So if you go to that URL, you'll see people talking about what was new in 2021 and then 2018 and 2016. So great resource, great thing that he does. Thanks everybody in the community who do what you do to share this knowledge. I'm just pointing it out like the CF librarian that I like to be. All right, let's move on to CF 2023 specifically. So first, some of you need to hear this. The PDF engine underlying CF has changed. Now, specifically, we're talking about CF HTML to PDF. Some of you CF document, this is not about that. This is about the new thing that was added in CF 11 called CF HTML to PDF. And the point is, it implements a new PDF generating engine if you use that tag. It uses a commercial tool called PDF Reactor that Adobe has licensed for us. So it's a much better engine than the one that was in there before. And it enables some new capabilities and tries not to break existing functionality. And I'm not aware of any issues where it's failing to work. And I'm just saying it adds new capabilities to that CF HTML to PDF tag and to things like the CF HTML to PDF item and the other ones that are associated with it. So anyway, check out the docs on that. I want to repeat, this does not affect CF document at all. They're different engines that has not really been improved in years. If you're still using CF document, you should really look at using CF HTML to PDF. And a key point is, if you had tried it with 11 or 2016 or 2018 or 2021 and you didn't like what it did, check out what it does in 2023. Now, I bring this up as a migration compatibility issue because you might find that the PDFs are very different in 2023. And I'm just explaining it's because they changed the engine under the covers. And there is no way to go back to the old engine. So you just have to deal with it. I hope that you will find that it's just better. And again, you can see the other resources in the previous page talked about how it's better and what it does better and what it adds. I'm not talking about what's new here. I'm just letting you know it is new and it may affect the PDFs you're producing. Okay. And that's it in my experience. Otherwise, it's a pretty smooth transition to 2023 if you're coming from 2021. You might go, wait, really? That's it? Yeah, as far as I know, for the most part, there's nothing that's deprecated or retired as of CF 2023. There are some things like that from prior versions. By the way, I see PD4ML. Yeah, I'm not familiar with PD4ML. I'm looking at the comments from Roman. Anyway, moving on. You can find out what is listed as deprecated or removed or retired in each version because there's a link here's the link. Adobe has a page called the deprecated features page. And I'm just saying there's nothing in there about 2023. So you don't have to worry about that. I've mentioned the release notes having unknown issues. You should look at that. There might be some issues. They're very specific things that don't affect most people, but you should look at it. There's the link to it. That's the 2023 release notes and its known issues section. Now, I was saying as far as 2023 itself is concerned, let me point out something that might surprise some of you. There was an update 5 that came out in October. And it was also an update at the same time to CF 2021 called Update 11. Check this out. Some of you will need to hear this. That update changed blocking access to the administrator if you use anything other than the built-in web server. So if you've been getting into the CF admin through IIS or Apache, and you're using the AJP connector, the ColdFusion web server connector, when you update CF 2023, or 2021 to that version. And if you upgrade the connector, when you upgrade that upgraded connector blocks access to the admin. And some of you might say, well, I thought they did that in CF 2016. Well, they did. And if you knew what to do, you could get around it. You cannot get around it anymore. This is an absolute block. You cannot get to the CF admin other than using the built-in web server. And you who are listening, who might work in DoD organizations, are going to say that the STIG says you're not supposed to enable the built-in web server. We need this to work. Well, let me just clarify. Take it up with Adobe. There have been discussions in the forums about that from people complaining about that. For now, what they're doing is not updating the connector. That's risky, right? That's against another STIG. You're supposed to do the updates. You're supposed to update the connector. So you've got to decide what to do or take it up with Adobe. Also remind you, as I said earlier, there was a new installer for CF 2023 and 2021 that were released at that same time in October, and they include the updates already. And they would include an updated connector. If you install CF 2023 or 2021 with the installer from October, I'm just telling you, when you implement the connector, it's going to be that upgraded connector, and it's going to block access to the admin from anything other than the built-in web server. Let's move on. You might wonder, well, what about the other updates? I just mentioned update 5. Well, updates 1 through 4 and update 6, they were just security updates. I'm talking about CF 2023 here. That's all they were. And so those security updates, by and large, don't have a negative impact. And basically, yeah, if you're moving from CF 2021, if you account for these issues, if you're coming from 2021, you could argue you're done. And you might even say, well, I can leave this talk. Well, I'll just say there's some more things I'll talk about. I'll talk about other issues from the past versions that you might have missed, and I'll also talk about some migration tools and resources. So do stick around. All right, so let's move on to 2021. So again, here is if you're moving from 2018 or earlier, or check this out, from an early update of 2021, right? Because you might be on 2021 and on the latest update, that's a pretty simple move to 2023, I think you're going to find. But if you're on a very early update of 2021, remember it came out in November of 2020. I've seen people running on CF 2021 without any updates. Well, that means they're on a version of CF 2021 that's now 3 years old this last month, 3 years old. Well, if you move from that to 2023, you might encounter issues because sometimes there were compatibility issues introduced in updates to 2021. So let's talk about the most important one when people try to go from 2018 to 2021 or 2023. This is a big deal. Date format, capital D issue. The date format mask of a capital D is now honored as meaning day of year. It used to mean day of month. Lowercase d meant day of month. Capital D was just treated by ColdFusion as also meaning day of month. But in CF 2021, for some reason, Adobe decided, nope, we got to change the rules, follow Java format. Java format says a capital D is day and year. Well, that's a big deal. Because if you've got code that uses a date format of a capital D or 2 Ds, capital DD, that is going to produce a very different result. I was helping somebody with this just earlier this week. They were stunned to see that their reports on 2023 showed, 12/362/2023. And they're like, why does it say 12/362? Because it's the day of the year. Well, I thought it was going to be the day of this month. Well, that's what it used to be until 2021. So again, in 2021, Adobe changed this. And you might go, well, that's crazy. Well, it is what it is. So if you did a date format like this, it used to come out looking like that. Now it comes out looking like that. Now, again, this is what I wrote back when 2021 came out. So that's why the dates are from back then. Because as soon as this happened back in November of 2020, I wrote a blog post saying, hey, whoa, everybody be aware. This is terrible. You need to be prepared. And I even have an example. You can visit that and run it. And there's the blog post that talks about it. Well, before you panic, just hear me out before you panic. Adobe did come out with a fix later that month in November of 2020. And then they folded that fix into update 1. Now, here's the key point. They did not change the behavior. They added a JVM argument that you have to add. If you add this JVM argument to ColdFusion Startup, it will tell ColdFusion to regard the capital D as a lowercase d. So I'm saying you must do that. If you don't do that, just updating CF doesn't work. Going to 2023, this problem still happens. So you see the blog post for what the JVM argument was that was on the previous page. Go get that JVM argument, and you might need to add it even to 2023. If you're moving, here's the key. If you're moving from 2018, this will trip you up. Or if you're moving from an old, actually, yeah, it didn't even matter. The first version of CF 2021, this was there from the get-go. Now, I want to also add that you can do a regex search using an editor or favorite search tool to look for date format with a capital D. And here's a couple different variants. Now, that's a lot. You're not going to write it down. Remember, you can get this slide from my presentations page of my website. And these were offered by folks in the comments of my blog post. Then they said one worked in like Notepad++ and one worked in VS Code. And I don't know whether either one worked in Dreamweaver or ColdFusion Studio. So, Sublime, you'll have to try variants yourself. But this would be to look for where you do use a capital D in a date format. They were trying to identify all the places. But again, if you just go back and add the JVM argument that's covered in this previous blog post right there, I give you the link to it. You can read more about that there. All right, let's move on. And this was a link to when they came out with the update with the JVM arguments in there as well. All the blog posts point ultimately to this. So let's move on. What about old features that were in 2018 and earlier that were removed in 2021? Remember, this is if you're moving from 2018 or earlier to 2023, you're going to pass go through ColdFusion 2021. There were some things that were removed in 2021. You might need them. You probably don't, but Corba for Common Object Request Broker Architecture, virtually nobody used that. That's why it was removed. LCDS, that was Lifecycle Data Services, that was removed. Flex, that was removed. Flash Paper, all these things related to Flex and Flash, they were removed. Lifecycle. Interestingly, they, for some reason, chose to take out this on misfire equals fire now of CF schedule, whatever. If you use that, you can't use that anymore. But other than that, there was nothing deprecated or retired as of CF 2021. So again, see that page I pointed to with all the deprecated features. They list each feature and what version it got removed in. I'm saying these are the key ones that were removed or changed in some way in 2021. Now, this isn't in there, but you need to be aware of this. And again, if you're moving from 2018 or earlier, be aware when you go to 2023 or 2021, there are certain words that are now reserved words, like static. If you use static as a variable in a CFC, that's now regarded as a reserved word. You'll get an error that says you can't assign a variable to the name static. And you might have had that for your own purposes. Well, now it's a reserved word. It really means declaring something to be a static thing. And if you need to undo that, you can add to the CFC as a property, of the CFC, the attribute, the CF component tag or the component statement and script, you can add the word static support equals false. Just say, I don't know what you mean by static ColdFusion. I want static to mean what I meant it to mean. But anyway, so you can control that. And it doesn't seem to apply to use of static and struct keys or variables in CFMs. It's just in a CFC. That's my observation back then in 2021. So here's a blog post with more on it. Also, Jim Jurista did a brief article where he covered other migration issues when he went from 2016 to 2021. So I just want to point that out. And there's his link for that. And then I want to share with you guys a couple bonus tips. I'll do it for each version. This isn't a compatibility issue, but I want you to be aware of it. If you had tried to use the ColdFusion Security Code Analyzer, that was a nice feature that was added starting in CF 2016. It was only available to those using Enterprise. Not standard, not developer. You couldn't use it as standard or developer. And so a lot of people never use the security code analyzer. I'm going to do a talk soon about it because I think a lot of people just never ever used it. And it works with CF Builder. And that's either the old CF Builder that was based on Eclipse or the new CF Builder that's based on VS Code. And you might go, wait, what? There's a CF Builder for VS Code? Yes, that came out last year. And I need to do a talk on that because a lot of people aren't aware of that. But that's another whole subject. We're not going to get into that. Anyway, here's a blog post I did on that topic when I discovered it back in 2021. Yeah, so that's nice. And that can help you do security scanning of your code to find out where you've got, cross-site scripting injection and SQL injection and things like that. And this tool will tell you. And yes, I know Pete Freitag has also got his wonderful tool. Gosh, it just slipped my brain. Help me out, somebody. Fixinator. So again, I'm not here to talk about all this other stuff. But I'll just throw out while I'm here, if you want to find out, either use the Adobe ColdFusion Security Analyzer or look into Fixinator, Fixinator, Fixinator. Let's move on. Now, I keep pointing out that when there's updates, sometimes compatibility issues get introduced in an update. And yeah, there were a couple of updates that introduced changes. And some bugs that were introduced have lingered since then. And in particular, check this out, Update 2 back in September 2021 and Update 5 in October 2022. When you go beyond those introduce some issues that could still be biting you now and could be biting you in 2023. And some were fixed with hot fixes, and you could look in tracker.adobe.com to find them if you know what to look for. I'll talk about searching that later. Some were fixed in the later update. There was an update this last, 2 months ago, Update 11 of 2023, of CF 2021 in October of 2023, that also addressed some fixes. So as I said about CF 2023, updates 6 through 10 and update 12 of 2021, they were just security updates. And of course, they're cumulative, so we need to ever go to the latest one. But I'm just saying, you might find that if you were just update, you'd address those problems. But again, some of these were finally fixed in 2023. And I'm just going to say there's too many for me to go over and identify clearly. I've tried to identify the ones that I know still remain. If there's others, we'll find out about them and share them in time. But for now, I haven't heard of them. But they may be there. We'll talk more about that later. And I also want to point out before we move on, when you're looking back at a prior version and you want to know what changed when, yes, there's a tech note for each update, but there's also a cool little update release notes document that many people don't notice. Besides the tech note for each update and besides the single document that lists all the updates, there's also this release notes update document that lists the key changes made in each update. That's pretty cool. And this is the URL for it. And I'm just going to tell you that exists also for prior releases. And it can be very helpful to look at that updates release notes page. So I know it's a lot to pay attention to, and some people just get overwhelmed with too much information, but I'm just, for those who want to know, the information's out there. Let's move on to 2018. So in 2018, again, if you moved from 2016 or earlier for some early update of 2018 into 2023 or 2021, what kind of issues might you face? Well, this is a potentially big one. The CF SQL type attribute of CF query param and of CF proc param, starting in CF 2018, it would fail if you used an undocumented abbreviation for this thing called CF SQL type. Now, again, some of your heads are spinning, like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, again, if you know what I'm talking about, great. If you don't, wait till you get the error or search your code. Here's the point. If you do a CF query param, CF SQL type equal CF SQL int, well, that was allowed. Basically, it was ignored prior to CF 2018. And then starting in 2018, Adobe realized the mistake. And they said, whoa, it's not supposed to be int. It's supposed to be integer. Now, prior to 2018, what happened was that it was just ignoring it. So yeah, that was worse, right? That meant you thought it was verifying that it was an integer, and you could put in Bob, and it would have validated. That's not good. So they realized that was a mistake. So they changed 2018 to say, no. If you say int, well, A, that's not allowed. It's supposed to be integer. And we're going to ignore if you say something that's an abbreviation. You must use the right full name. So anyway, that's that. And date time was not right. It should either be date or timestamp, not date time. That was never valid. Num was never valid. It should be numeric, and so on. So I'm going to say read the docs. They tell you what the valid values are in the docs for those two tags or their script equivalents. That's not our focus right now. I'm just saying you should be aware of it. And by the way, if you do query execute, when you do query execute in script, you can pass in query params like this, and this then still applies. So even if you're doing script, don't go, I don't use those tags. Nope. Query execute in script, you might do parameterized queries where you're doing basically like a CF query param. That's how you do it in script in a query execute. And that CF SQL integer has got to be right or it will fail. Joseph threw in, we had legacy code using incorrect that bit us when we moved. There you go. From 2016 to 2021. Exactly. So again, make sure everybody understands. So yes, if you move from 2016 to either 2021 or 2023, these may bite you. That's why I'm talking about it. You might be still on 2016 or 11 or 10, and you might have never noticed this problem before. Well, you need to be aware. It might bite you now. So thank you for Joseph for confirming that it happened to you as well. And again, before this change, they just ignored what you put in as an invalid value and treated it as a string. And that's not good either. But anyway, at least it didn't fail, but it was failing validation, and that could have bit you. But anyway, and by the way, this again reasserts a point I was making earlier. These changes were actually rolled back into 2016, but only the very last update that was released in March of 2021. So some of you who've been running on 2016 never got around to doing that last update. You didn't get bit by this. But yeah, even on 2016, you could get bit by this when you did update 17. And that brings that point I was making, that don't listen to people who say this problem didn't happen if you went from 2016 to 2021. It did if you were on the later version of 2016, a later update. And conversely, it didn't happen if you were still on an older update. So again, I try to keep track of this stuff. I know it's a lot to keep track of, but it just goes to show that you got to be careful when people make statements. They're often incomplete statements. You need to know all these details to be able to correctly know what happened. Why on one server were you all running 2016 and we had this problem, and on another server we were running 2016 and we didn't have this problem? Well, it's because one was on update 17 and the other one wasn't. And so if you're moving code from one or the other of those to 2023, the one that was on the latest update, you won't encounter that problem. If you're on one that was still on an older update, yeah, you might encounter this problem. So anyway, let's move on. There were also, that's it. So there were some new reserved words in 2018 as a part of their new OO support, object-oriented support. ColdFusion CFML, the language, added abstract and function and final as reserved words, and null if you enabled null support. That was new in 2018. Well, you may have code that uses those things as variables or function names, and you will get errors when you move to, in this case, 2018, or if you skip from 2016 to 2023, you will encounter, hey, this is weird. Why are we getting an error like that? And these can be often very obtuse errors where it's, not clear where the error is occurring. So just be on the watch. And you may think you don't use those, but maybe some framework you use might use it. For example, ColdSpring used abstract and function as variables. And I found it in particularly this particular one because I had some people that were using apps that were built on ColdSpring. Even if you say you don't use ColdSpring, you might be using something that's built on ColdSpring, like a blog CFC was built on ColdSpring. And some people are still using blog CFC. And I am. And in fact, it was tripping me up when I first went to 2018. And I found where that code was. And I just changed the code to say, abstract 2, wherever it said abstract. And that solved the problem. So you may find you just need to carefully find and replace the variable names and properties of things to solve the problem. Just be careful. Don't do a global find and replace, because there may be stuff you shouldn't be changing. So again, that's a bigger subject. You could just run through the code and wait till you get the errors. That's risky. So just be aware this was an issue that bit some people. I'll leave it at that. We have lots more to cover. There were features that were removed or retired in 2018. So again, you might encounter this. The CF schedule timeout was taken away. They want you to instead do a CF setting request timeout on the page being called. This particular attribute of CF cache, that particular attribute of CF collection and of CF error. And then some things were retired. Now check this out. Retired means not enabled by default. So they won't be there, but you can put them back. And they're mostly rarely used things. Some of people still use some of these things. And in particular, let me show you this. The UI tags that under the covers were based on what was called the YUI JavaScript library. Tags like CF menu, CF tree, CF calendar, CF input, if you did the auto suggest. These things caused ColdFusion to build some JavaScript that then leveraged a library that was buried deep inside of the ColdFusion CF scripts folder. Well, that was taken away in 2018 and retired. And so they just won't work. And so if you're going from 2016 to 2023, you may find, whoa, these things stopped working. What's going on? Well, again, you can re-enable them. And it also was rolled back into 2016 as of update 3 and an update installer that came out. So anyway, some people in 2016 experienced it, some did not. Everybody on 2018 and above is experiencing this. And the way you re-enable these is you using the tech note that I'll show you in a moment, the deprecated features page discusses this. You go get a copy of the needed library. It's an old YUI library. You go get that. They tell you, they provide it on the Adobe website, and you get it, and it's a zip, and you extract it and drop it in. And they tell you how to do it in the deprecated features page. There again is the URL. So if you trip over this problem, go to that deprecated features page, go to the bottom, read about this YUI stuff. They'll tell you step 1, copy this file. Step 2, extract it. Step 3, put it in a particular folder. That's it. No need to even restart ColdFusion. Immediately, your problem will be solved. Now, it is using an old YUI library that's not even updated by Yahoo, who made it, and that's why Adobe stopped carrying it. But anyway, if you need it back, of course, there's people who are going to want to jump in now and say, well, you shouldn't be using those tags. You shouldn't have been using them. And we told you years ago, don't use them. They use JavaScript. That library might be out of date. Yes, that's a general wise thing to say, that these JavaScript-based ColdFusion tags, they were inherently going to use some library that could be out of date within weeks or months or years, and that's what happened. And finally, Adobe couldn't rely on Yahoo to fix it. They weren't going to fix it anymore, so they finally said, look, we're just going to pull these out. So if you use them, you need to solve this problem or switch to some other option. And every JavaScript framework, jQuery, React, whatever, you can find alternatives to doing all these things. You've got to do that. That's yours just to do. All right, other compatibility issues in 2018 that may conflict with existing code that came as per updates. Update 1 added a new function called get canonical path, and some people actually had that as a function of their own. And in particular, Fusebox, if you still were using Fusebox, they wrote their own function called that. Well, that now conflicted when such code was moved to 2018 update 1 or above, or 2021 or 2023. Just saying, if you're moving from an older version of CF, you may encounter that problem. Update 4 added a file append in case you do that. And if you look at the release notes I talked about before, this is the 2018 version of that update release notes page. Again, this is listing in one page what the various updates were and what they added. It's really cool. You might go, oh, I didn't know that function got added or that tag got added. So anyway, let's talk about a bonus tip. CF 2018 also introduced the Performance Monitoring Toolset, PMT. If you didn't know about that, that's a monitor built into ColdFusion. The old server monitor that was in 2016 and earlier, since CF8, is gone. And that old one was only for enterprise. This new one is for standard or enterprise or developer. And I'll at some point do a talk on that because a lot of people never notice that. Also, if you're doing script, you don't have to put semicolons anymore. CF 2018 said you don't need to worry about that. Now, again, I'm not listing everything that's new. I'm just sharing when you're doing compatibility assessment of things. Sometimes knowing about these things might be helpful to solve some problems you're facing. So anyway, moving on. What about 2016? So if you're moving from 11 or earlier, or from some early update of 2016, what things might you encounter? And there was only a few. It actually was like 2023, not a lot. But this might be a big deal for you. JSON data type preservation is now inferred at compile time rather than at runtime. And so things would fail in ways they didn't fail before if they weren't correct. And there's a JVM argument that they added in 2016 to change that. So if you need to worry about this, check it out. For JSON serialization issues, you might find this is important. Preserve type equals true or false. I'm going to leave it at that, let you look into that. If you do that, they point out in the docs about it that you need to clear the CF classes because it's in compiled CF class files. You need to recompile them. And here was a resource talking more about that. So if that interests you, go check that out. CF collection used to have a path attribute. They now ignore it. You've got to define the path in the admin. Let's move on. Update 2 added metadata support for setting JSON data types. That could be very important for some people. So check that out. If you're dealing with JSON problems and serialization problems, look at this metadata support of the serialized JSON and deserialized JSON. I'll leave you to look into that. And then update 3 added some new functions. Again, you could trip over if you had functions of the same name. Same with update 7. I mentioned that. And update 11. Okay, so there you go. And then here's that release notes for 2016. Here were the changes in 2016. And another little bonus tip, if you didn't hear this, CF 2016 added Redis session storage. That's a cool feature that a lot of people are still to this day not using. You can store ColdFusion sessions in a Redis data store. And if you restart ColdFusion, your users aren't logged out because on the restart, it pulls the sessions out of Redis. And it's as if you never restarted CF. You know, as far as the sessions are concerned, they don't disappear. That's a pretty cool thing. By the way, I looked away for a moment, wasn't paying attention. Roman, you said, yes, you hate this. What's the this option to not make semicolons optional? Wow. So check that out. So he doesn't like the fact that CF 2016 or 2018 took away the requirement to use semicolons. And I guess you've got challenges where you want it to always be required. Maybe you're going back and forth between different versions of CF and you want to make sure that the code's always going to work in every version. Yeah, I'm not aware that they ever had a feature that says, make it not optional. You must put in semicolons. Interesting. It just goes to show you can't please everybody. Anyway, let's move on. If you're interested in that Redis stuff, just Google ColdFusion sessions and Redis. You'll find plenty on that. Again, I should do a talk on that. I never have. There's so many things to do. Anyway, moving on. What about CF11? If you moved from CF10 or earlier, well, this was a big deal. The DB var name. If you did a CF stored proc and a CF proc param, there was an attribute called DB var name where you named the name of the variable within the stored procedure. And that was ignored since like CF5 until suddenly CF11 resurrected it in update 3. Very weird. Out of the blue, they did that. Just crazy. And you now, with certain databases, have to prefix that DB var name with like an @ sign in SQL Server and a colon in Oracle. So again, this was stuff that was back in 2014. I get it that some of you haven't thought of it in years. We're talking about if someone's moving from CF10, what might they trip over and go into 2023? This is something you would trip over. You may have code that just says DB var name equals some parameter, and it now has to be DB var name equals colon param whatever for Oracle, or @ sign param whatever for SQL Server. Okay. Then they did add a JVM argument back in CF11 to revert this, but weirdly, they didn't carry that into 2016. So you must change your code. You cannot get around this problem. You must change your code. I hope that makes sense. There's a blog post about it back then. I'm going to move on. Other breaking changes, CF chart changed to using a different underlying engine from Greenpoint to Zing. It no longer used XML, but JSON for extending it. There was a tool to assist with that. You can find it. I think it's still there now. They did some strict number validation. And so there was provision to turn that off in either application CFC or the CF application tag. So if that's of need, check that out. That's there. And then they removed some features just like before, mostly old tags that people didn't use. And there was a blog post at that time that went into it if you want to check that out. And then some tags like CF graph, CF servlet, CF text input. They deprecated a bunch of things. So again, see that deprecated features page for more on what went away in CF11. And lastly, wrapping up some bonus, there was a lot of changes in 11. They introduced full support for CF script. So if you didn't know that, since CF11, you've been able to do everything in script. There's only a couple of things that you must do in tags. That was a change in 2014. People still to this day sometimes don't know that. They added a new secure profile page that showed you the 20 settings that were changed by CF10's secure profile install option. Now you can control it in the admin. That's nice. And then they moved some things that used to be enterprise only to standard, like the car feature used to be enterprise only. Now that's in standard. The security sandbox used to be enterprise only. Now it's in standard. HTML5 charts had limitations in enterprise. They were lifted. WebSockets limits were lifted. So anyway, those were improvements. Again, sometimes people miss those things and they're working with a new version and don't even know, hey, I could be using these things. Yes. For years, you could have been using those things. As far as compatibility changes introduced in updates of 11, there was a use of API that would break things. Now, Adobe changed that in the future. They called it REST. And then in 2018, they changed it to something else again called CF API resources. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. These were problems then that are fixed now, but I'm just pointing it out to people back then. And there was no single updates release notes page like for 2016 and above. Sadly, that's when they started doing it. But just look at each updates tech note, and there's a page that points to all the tech notes. That's the URL for the page that points to every tech note. And if you didn't know it, that URL can be used for 2016, 2018, 2021. Just change the number 11, and you will see a page of all the updates of that CF version, which is pretty cool. All right, wrapping up. Got 5 minutes left. Migration tools and resources. There are such tools and resources. Some of you know this, some of you don't. In the CF Administrator itself is a code compatibility analyzer. Yes, that has been there forever. It's in the debugging and logging section of the ColdFusion Administrator, and it does a pretty good job. It doesn't identify all issues, though. For example, it does not find this CF SQL type problem. I don't know why, but it doesn't. So I helped some people a couple months ago, and they were using that analyzer, and they said, hey, our code checks out all good, and yet we moved it to 2023, and it failed, and it was this problem. I don't know why the compatibility analyzer didn't identify that particular problem, but it does identify plenty of problems. So I'd recommend you at least try it, and you might be amazed at the stuff that it does tell you. It also sometimes warns you about problems that are not your problem. So there's ways to turn off the warnings. There's ways to turn off specific warnings. Again, the whole tool is deserving of its own talk sometime. I don't have time to get into it now, but just check it out. Also, if you didn't hear, Adobe had created the CF Fiddle site at cffiddle.org, 7, 8 years ago. And that site, you can go run code against any of these versions, 2023, 2021, 2018. They're all at their latest update. You can just go in there and drop in some CFML code and run it. There's also trycf.com, which was available before this. And that supports those CF versions and older ones and Lucy 4 and 5. I don't know why I didn't tell you this, but it also goes back to 2016 and 11 and 10, as well as Lucy 4, 5, and 6. Yeah, I should update this. It actually supports 4, 5, and 6, and also back to CF10. So that could be really helpful. They're just fiddles. They're places where you can drop in CFML code and it just runs. Of course, you can't use data sources. You can't use mail servers. You can't do things like that. But any CFML code that doesn't rely on anything else, yeah, you can just run that code. And if you didn't know, Adobe's provided Docker images for CF 2023, 2021, CF 2018. Those can be helpful in testing. Some people use that to do automated, CI/CD testing. But I'm saying some of you maybe don't do all that, but you might go, hey, I don't want to install ColdFusion. Well, you don't have to. You can get the Docker image for CF 2023. And if you know how to use Docker, you can deploy the CF 2023 image and have a volume that points to your code and run that code in that container. Again, I've had a whole talk on that. This isn't the place to discuss that. Then finally, Ortus, as you may know, has command box. And by the way, they have not only command box, but also Ortus, command box, Docker images. Anyway, those are another alternative to installing CF. So I'm just saying you don't have to install CF to find out if there's going to be a problem. Any of these tools at various levels of ease or flexibility would be another way for you to test. And there's how to learn more about command box. So check those out to help you with migration. There's also resources. Some of you may know this, some don't. There's an Adobe migration guide. Yes, a PDF. There's the URL for that. Now, it's mostly about installing, configuring, and migrating admin settings. It's really not so much about migrating ColdFusion code. But anyway, just check it out. It's there. And don't forget that deprecated features page. I keep pointing to that. That's really helpful. And then the CF Docs I mentioned before has both the reference and the developing ColdFusion apps guide or the developer's guide. Definitely check that out and ask me, because I'd like to think of myself as the reference librarian. If you can't find something, reach out to me. I've given you my contact information. I help people understand and resolve problems, whether migration or otherwise. And I want to say a couple of final things before we wrap up, why else you should migrate to 2023. When does each CF version end? When does it stop getting updates, including security updates? Well, 2023 will get them until 2028. 2021 will get them until 2025. 2018 stopped getting them this past July. So if you're still on 2018, there's no more updates. Sorry. If you're on 2016, they haven't been updated in 2 years. CF11, that hasn't been updated in 4 years. Don't be running on these old versions. Adobe stopped updating them. You are running at a grave risk of security vulnerabilities by being on these old versions. So again, get to at least 2021. You got 2 more years, or a year and a half, something like that. And 2023, you'll have nearly 5 years left. All right. And here's a page that discusses this. This is not just me coming up with stuff out of the air. This is a documented Adobe provided page for every Adobe product, including ColdFusion. Now, finally, I've shared what I knew, what I've come across, but I want to say there's a bunch of issues that either had happened in the past or might still come that might affect a migration. So I want you to know you should always be prepared to look at the Adobe CF bug tracker. It's called tracker.adobe.com. Now, some of you go, oh, everybody knows that. I'm going to tell you, no. In my experience, most people seem to not know that, or they don't think to use it. Now, here's my point. You might say, oh, I'm not going to file any bug reports. Nobody ever does anything about it. That's another subject. I find they do fix lots of bug reports. But the point I'm making is you might have found that other people have filed a bug report describing the problem you are now facing. So how would you use this? Because it's very confusing. A, you have to log in to use it. Just even to search it, you got to log in. B, do not use the search box at the top. Click the search menu item and you'll see a search form. In that form, choose ColdFusion as the product, and then check this out. Put your search term, like if you get an error message, put some word, some unique word from that error message, or if it's a tag or a function, put that name of that tag or function in the title field and hit enter and see what it comes up with. There'll be results on the right of what bug reports or feature improvements people have requested related to that. And you can read it and you might find there's a fix coming or somebody will show you a workaround. And if it's not there by the search of the title, then come back to the search form and put it into the description field because they're separate fields. And the tool is kind of obtuse in that way. It was written many, many years ago. It's a terrible interface. Mark Takata said they're going to be improving it. Yay. Hope they do someday. But until then, I'm just saying, when you're struggling with the problem, you can Google stuff and you might find an answer, but Google doesn't tend to look at this tracker site. So you need to dig into it yourself. And this is how you can dig into it. And finally, if you add a vote for a bug or add a comment on the bug, you'll get notified of future replies or fixes that Adobe comes out with. So you should definitely vote them up and add comments and share ideas. It's a big, big help. Now, before I move on, I see Roman asking, is there any chance? Okay, so he said, is there any chance we can look at logs again directly in CF 2021 admin? I didn't cover that as a thing that was removed because that's not really a compatibility issue, but he's pointing out that Adobe, for security reasons, in one of the updates, stopped showing you in the CF admin. They stopped letting you look at the logs via the admin. They regarded that as some security risk. So they took it away. Now I'm going to tell you, 2023 added that back. Okay, Roman? So if you go to 2023, you can see the logs in the admin. That's a reason to move to 2023. Did they do it to 2021? No, they did not. I checked it just recently and it wasn't there. And I'm on the latest update. So no, for some reason, they haven't added it back. I don't know why, but anyway, no. As far as I know, there's no way to do that in 2021. And then finally, Drew shared Slack is a great resource. Now, let me just say, I didn't add here. I should have considered doing it. There are many resources you guys can turn to. I said the community in general. Let's be clear. Of course, there's Google. Of course, there's Twitter or X or Mastodon. Or there's a Facebook CF programmers group, or the Slack. There's a CFML Slack channel. And there's the Adobe ColdFusion community forums. So there's lots of resources. And let me just tell you, if you go to CF411, let me just do that real quick. I had set up to be able to show you guys a tab in a browser. Come on, where did it go? I have a CF411.com. Many people don't know about it. Word doesn't get spread very often. CF411.com. And you can use words to get to particular parts of it. But anyway, if you just go to the CF411.com, that is a list of 2,000 tools and resources of interest to CFers in over 150 categories. And if you scroll down, the first section is resources and the second section is tools. And under resources, look, here's help mechanisms for CFML. Now, by the way, I've recently introduced dark support, so that's why you'll see it as showing as dark. Anyway, so I know it doesn't look so good when you mouse over it, but it's help mechanisms for CFML, mailing list, forums, and other, I should have said social media. Anyway, so look, here's the Adobe Community Forums, the ColdFusion Portal, the CFML Slack channel, the Facebook CF Programmers Group, the Lucy Forums, the Orders Forums, Stack Overflow, Server Fault, and Experts Exchange. So yeah, lots of places to seek and ask questions for sure. So again, go to CF411. And by the way I designed this is if you click on this link, that link goes to cf411.com/cfcomhelp. That would take you right to this page. It redirects it to this URL. You can share that as well. But if you want to make it a nice, simple, clean thing, this link right there is just cf411/cfcomhelp. All right. We're done. Let me get this and see if there's some more Chat GPT, right? So somebody shared Chat GPT. That's another option. That's why I missed. Okay. And that was fixed last month. Yep, sometimes. So Rocky shared that he'd reported a bug back 4 years ago and it was just fixed last month. That can happen. I'll tell you, I've seen people write bugs and weeks later it was fixed. So it just depends on all kinds of things like what's the nature of the problem, how easy is it to fix, how well is it identified, how many people have encountered it, how important is it? Of course, all those things factor in. But I'm just trying to say, don't believe that every bug report you file will never get fixed. Don't believe that every bug report you file will take 4 years to fix. That's not true. So anyway, let's wrap up here. So lots of issues to be aware of, especially as you move from older versions. A problem that you hit may not really be new to 2023, but maybe some version you skipped, or it may be due to you moving to a new server or failing to bring over settings. So just keep all these things in mind. Don't always blame the new version. It might be something else. And again, for some people, it really is a trivial move. For others, it can seem very difficult, but there's usually a good answer and it can be fixed and made to go faster. For most people, it's somewhere in the middle. So we'll leave it at that. I hope this talk has opened your eyes, made you be prepared, better prepared for whatever version you're coming from. And again, I can help you in understanding, resolving issues, and to reach out to me. Here's my contact information. And there again is the deck of slides, this PDF of all these slides. You can go check that out and have all this to back you up. Thank you, Joseph, very much. I appreciate it, everybody. That's it. There's nothing more I have to say. I'm open to any questions or comments, or if you got to go ahead and get going. We understand. Thanks for coming. But I'll hang out for a few minutes to see if there's any outstanding questions. And again, don't forget this recording, this YouTube meeting is being recorded, and the URL you're looking at right now is the URL to give out to other people to see the recording, and I'll put it in the recordings page soon. Again, thanks everybody for your kind comments. And feel free, anybody with any question at all, type it in. If you're typing a long question, you might want to say, hey, I got a question, and then I'll wait to make sure I see your question. Hey, Jason asked, any job resources? Yes, if you go to my CF411, I'm going to go back up to the top. This is what this is for. How often do you see a question asked in the community? Does anybody know where I'm going to find resource about whatever, or what tools are available for whatever? This is the place that I've set up 15, 20 years ago, and it's grown and grown and grown ever since. And I keep it up to date, generally very up to date, like just the other day, right? It says up here it was last updated on December 11th. So I try to keep it up to date. Anyway, back to your question about jobs. Look at that. Job resources for CFML. So again, just there's hosting alternatives, there's documentation, there's conferences, certification prep, books, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, let's go to job resources. And yeah, there's the CFML Slack has a jobs channel, the Facebook CF jobs group, Facebook CF remote jobs group, the Get CFML jobs site. Google's got a jobs list. Indeed, Simply Hired, Upwork, and ZipRecruiter all have CF jobs. So yeah, check it out. And Modernize or Die, they always list jobs as one of the latter sections of the podcast. CF Web Tools, they announce when they have jobs, and on and on and on. So again, just cf411.com. Check that out. Spread the word. It's not new, but few people seem to ever mention it. I've given up worrying about that years ago. Don't know what to need to do, but it's there. One problem, of course, is it's one big hunkin' page, and it's just, cobbler's children not having any shoes. I should come in here and make this database generated and have a different landing page for each category and a different landing page for each tool and resource. And I've been wanting to do that for many, many years and just never gotten around to it. Thank you, Roman. I hope to be there. What is the drama with Host Tech? Let's just say there is definitely a lot of drama with Host Tech. They went through some ownership changes in the past year, and it's had some pretty negative impact on a lot of people's experience. Now, we should be clear. Some people are saying in the community, I'm not having any trouble. So let's not say everybody's suffering, but some people are suffering pretty badly and have decided to move. So you might go, well, where can I go? How about the CF411? Maybe I got something there. Hosting alternatives for ColdFusion. There you go. So look, I keep track of who's offering. And look, I tell you whether it's shared or virtual or dedicated. I tell you what version they support and when I checked it. And so there's people that support 2021, 2018, 2023. And so there's, there was HostTech, there's DataBank, CF Dynamics, BMC, Iera, there's NewTek, Viviotech, and XByte. And I don't think there's anybody else, but there are others, and there's an Adobe provided list that lists some ones that I'd not ever really worked with, but these are ones that I see mentioned or have seen mentioned recently and over the years. So yeah, there you go. Plenty of alternatives. So don't put up with any hosting company that you feel is not treating you well. Get out, just, you can wait and try and hope that they'll do better. But if they're not satisfying you, there are plenty of options. And of course, I should add here that somebody, I forget who it is, but somebody in the community wants to always point out, hey, you don't even need to use a hosting company, right? Of course, you can deploy onto AWS or Azure or Oracle Cloud, and they've got, free or paid servers with virtual servers, and you can deploy a ColdFusion license you pay for or Lucy or whatever. So again, there's plenty of options. You don't have to put up with some hosting company that's got you suffering. Do not put up with that. Okay, cool. I think the questions and comments have petered out. So with that, I'll just give you one more chance, and then I'll go ahead and end the meeting, and we can all get on with our days. And I'll look forward to seeing you all in the new year with some new talks, and everybody have a happy holiday season. You betcha. Thank you. I love to do it, and I appreciate the feedback. It's what keeps me going, because it's not everybody's cup of tea. Trust me. Not everybody loves my talks or my style of presenting or my style of consulting. I'm here for you. If I can help, that's what I'm here for. All right, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. See y'all till the next time.